Alright, this is Mel from Metal Hammer and I'm here with Mr. Tobias Ford from Ghost. We're going to talk a little bit about Metallica. And obviously you're a Metallica fan yourself.
Yes.
What was your entry point into them? What was the first album you heard of theirs?
Well, the first time I heard them, I don't remember because my brother was a fan of them.
Oh, really?
So as they were sort of ever present in my life. But the first album that I picked up as it came and I was aware of that was gonna come out was the Black Album.
Right. So you remember that actually being released?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Oh, absolutely.
What was it like then, in the kind of atmosphere around it? Because really, metal changed forever after that album. You
Yeah.
know, and it was the biggest any metal album had ever been. It's probably the biggest any band will ever get off the back of that. So it was almost like a line in the sand between where metal had been to for that point and where it's been since. Can you remember the kind of vibe around the release and the songs that were coming out and the general feeling about it?
Yes, I remember quite a lot from that time because there was, for me, I've spent hours in interviews talking about I'm pretty sort of archaeological in my music taste, and I have been throughout my life quite a lot. Even when I was younger than that, I was sort of exploring music that was older, like 60s music. I was in, if you'd met me in like 1989, one of my absolute favorite bands of all time was Rolling Stones.
Really?
Yeah, so I was
Wow.
I was devouring everything that had to do with Rolling Stones.
Where did that come from?
My mom, I think, but you know, I had an older brother as well, so there was just a great influx of music, and so I especially when I was like 7, 8, I was completely into like 60s music, like The Doors, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, all that, Beatles, of course, like all of that. That was like what I was plowing through, and before that, I already was into heavy metal bands, and around 91, 92, I would say, and this sounds pretty awful, but that was one of the few moments when I was actually interested in anything that was current,
Really?
anything that was contemporary.
Wow.
Because there were a few records that came out in 91, 92 that I liked a lot. Black Album, Nevermind. I liked Pearl Jam a lot at the time.
What was
Alice
it-
in Chains.
What was it about those albums that suddenly made you pay attention to what was happening now? Like what kind of made you pivot towards them and notice it all?
Another band that was obviously huge at the time was Guns N' Roses,
Sure.
and I liked them already before, so I was already a big fan of Guns N' Roses. I already knew about Metallica, and I guess the reason why I got into all those bands was because my brother was listening to them. So he didn't live at home at the time, but he would come around all the time, like, hey, have you heard this band? Oh, Faith No More. Yeah, I've seen that shirt somewhere. And he was like, listen to this. This is so great. And it was like, here you go, Angel Dust. Have you heard this band, Alice in Chains? I think I've seen their name because I was always in record stores.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things had been creeping up on me a little. And when I was like, even in the late 80s, I used to buy Metal Hammer.
Awesome.
Yeah. But it didn't matter if they were in sometimes we had German
I
ones.
was going to say, would it have been the German one or the English one? Because they were kind of coexisting a bit more closely back then.
Yes. So I didn't matter because I couldn't read. I couldn't read them. Or I struggled to read them, but I bought them for the posters.
Right, okay.
And they were quite expensive as well. So it was like that was the allowance basically, to get like. And so I already had. There's this classic Metallica poster that was originally issued in 1986. It must have been. It's it's the Master Puppets, but with the Jump in the Fire Devil on it. In 1991, it was hard to miss. If you were interested in music and you liked heavy music, it was like Guns N' Roses they were everywhere. Metallica was everywhere. Nevermind, like Smells Like Teen Spirit was all. I mean, it was ever present, like omnipresent.
You couldn't escape for the iconography and the music just being a part of the culture really at that point.
Right. And it just felt like something that was already in my blood because I'd listened to a lot of music before that. And again, I got so much guidance from my brother. He was the one that got me into Motorhead and Black Sabbath years before that. And just being around him, it was sort of like he was just fed to me. So, but in '91, when the Black album came, it was like, yeah, that was the first time I chose to sort of step into Metallica world, but I was already familiar with it. So it's like, when I think about being a kid, I remember like looking at James Hetfield and all those pictures and the records. Like, I thought he was like the coolest thing ever.
When it kind of came to opening that band up to you, I mean, does that album still rank highly for you? Because it was arguably their biggest ever album, but it's quite divisive as well. I mean, there's still people even today that will still go, that's the bit they sold out on, or they weren't a proper metal band anymore. I mean, how do you view where that album sits for Metallica now?
I can see it from several different angles, and just first and foremost, I like the album. I think it's really good. I think it's phenomenal. I understand if I had been 10 years older and I had been listening to Metallica for 8 years at that time, I can understand why people would have regarded that one as like such a sidestep. Because it is. Because they were the band that could do it, and they were the band that understood that they were, and they took that chance. And they did everything. What you saw with the Black album and its following album cycle and the tour that they did was a band that did everything right. And there are a few moments in rock history where you got bands that do that. AC/DC, Back in Black, another one. Like, they took a major hit, lost their singer, and then they just chose to do a really fucking kick-ass album that is so straight and so bang on. And there are several, but definitely Black Album was one of those where, from a professional point of view as well, I'm so in awe of their concentration at the time. And I think that sometimes people comment on that album that's as being such a sidestep, forgetting how much they progressed before that. Already on Ride Lightning, they were taking leaps, and they were already there, like, so much ahead of all their contemporary, all their pals. Not only their heavy songs, but Fade to Black.
Fade to Black, going from that to something like certainly The Unforgiven or even Nothing Else Matters, that's not a drastic leap, and it took them 2 albums to get that.
Right.
So you're right, there was definitely some seeds being sown early on, that progression towards something a bit different.
Yeah.
Even if people don't like to admit that it was.
And if you fast forward even further into early 2000s, when obviously the film that everyone saw,
Some Kind of Monster.
Yeah, and there was a great deal of very public therapeutic work. And even when I saw that, because they were they were talking about they obviously a lot of fear and angst was coming up to surface, and they were talking about making a real and honest record. Whereas I got the impression that already, especially on the Black album, like Unforgiven, Nothing Else Matters. It's pretty ballsy. Like, it's very, very brave writing songs like that. Not only musically, but lyrically. The lyrics.
Yeah, very raw.
Yeah,
Emotionally.
I mean, even though I am a big fan of Kill 'Em All as well. I think that's a fantastic record. But from a maturity point of view, I think that they really, really started maturing, and they got really good at Ride Lightning onwards. And lyrically, specifically on Master of Puppets, and Justice for All and Black Album, lyrics are unbelievably good. He's he was a master lyricist. Very good with words and very good to find the hooks, but still sort of at least gave the impression of talking about a lot about himself, even though it was seemingly about other subjects. It felt very, very sincere.
You felt more of a personal connection to James through that because of the way he opened up on those albums.
Yes, it's impressive to see a band that completely just devours. They grabs the opportunity and they understands their unique position to do that. Whereas if they hadn't done that, God knows, like what would have happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so many bands succumbing, like bands that were popular in the '80s, succumbing to the absolute fucking tsunami that was 1991 for most bands.
Yeah.
And they were one of the few bands that actually got to thrive in the beginning of the '90s. Whereas like '91 was very much the year of sort of debut bands, or like reforming bands in a way.
Yeah.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, another example of that. I mean, no offense to anyone. Believe me, I like a lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers, but when they made Blood Sugar Sex Magic and their coming records, they could have as well just dismissed the records that they did before. Mother's Milk has moments, but the ones before, it's basically just a funkorama jam. Like, whereas when they did Blood Sugar Sex Magic, that was like a debut record. Like, bang, here you go. That's when they really got a completely new set of fans.
Yeah, it felt like it was an era where rules were just being ripped up and bands were being bold and bands weren't afraid to reach for the ring, like try and push themselves into that wider consciousness.
Which is really cool. Years later, I think that Green Day did that as well.
They did, yeah. Maybe the last, maybe you could say Foo Fighters as well, in terms of a band that started off in the real alternative scene and then kind of became this giant like
of course
thing. But yeah, Green Day totally did that. They just became a different band.
Yeah. Well, obviously Dave's trip is such a weird one, just because he was in one of the biggest bands at the time, and then he created
Dave Grohl.
Yeah, Dave Grohl. Yeah. Sorry, Dave Grohl was, and he did the miraculous move of switching positions as well, and became essentially even bigger band than Nirvana ever was. And so that's it. But the reason why I threw in Green Day is that they did a similar thing with American Idiot, where they were essentially sort of going a little bit downhill before that. Or let's be frank, they were fucking
warning was a real downtime for them.
Yeah, it was not. They were not doing very well, and they did a lot of the right things. And as a music fan, as a musician, and back then obviously I saw it as an outsider, and now I see it from a little bit more from a colleague point of view. It's always impressive when you notice a band. There's something cosmic that just like there's an energy around a release, and it just explodes. That's what everyone wants to do,
Absolutely. And when you look at Metallica in particular, seeing as I think that, like you said, all those bands around that era kind of grew and changed stuff up, and they became embraced by the mainstream as a result of that. I think Metallica received the biggest almost kickback from that as well, because metal fans are super overprotective, very wary of anything that is deemed commercial or too polished. So as much as it obviously took them into arenas and stadiums, it also, almost made them like the whipping boys for metal for a little while. They kind of became the standard of like a reference point for people selling out or turning their back on the metal scene.
Right.
And they almost seem to, instead of like retreating and just going, okay, we'll make like a heavier album next time, they almost like pushed back against that even harder. they cut all their hair off in the 90s. They started writing like country songs on Load and
I was
Reload.
15 at the time, so
Oh, right.
I did not react very good to that. No.
Oh really? So
Okay,
you
well.
weren't up. But I was going to ask you, what do you think about what they did next with the Load and Reload cycle? And they changed the logo and they completely rebranded. Really?
I did not like that. at all.
Really?
No, I am. No, I went to see them in 1996 as well. I'd seen them before, luckily. But I was, as a 15-year-old, I was already well into my study of like old metal, and I was very set in my ways. I am to a degree still that if we were talking about metal. But it really felt like they had taken a step that I was not ready to take. We were definitely in two different we were in two different positions in life. But just to be honest, also be a reflecting person, looking back on it now I'm older. I'm essentially like older than they were when they made that record, or those records. I definitely understand now why they did that, why they did what they did, and why they had to do that. I think that as much as I, or a lot of other people that I know at least, were not fans of what they did in the later part of the 90s, I think that in the greater scheme of things, they needed to do that in order to become what they are today. And another thing that I think a lot of people do not get is the fact that their lives, their ways of doing things, their experience is unlike any other. Like, the level of fame, the level of demands, the level of the level of pressure that they experienced, probably just to make the Black Album, but definitely after the Black Album, is nothing like none of the other bands on any of the big fours, like none of the other bands underneath that have experienced that.
No, not even gone near that kind of experience.
So they're astronauts in that sense. They've been through like something that so few has ever experienced. And also they were older than anyone else, like younger. I mean, me and my buddies, we were just kids, and even people that were 10 years older were still like 8 to 10 years younger than they were. So it's hard for, I guess that's the biggest blow of Load, like when they blew their load, was that a lot of their fans that had been around maybe 5 or 10 years were very confused as to what they were doing, because most of us were younger than they were. So we don't experience the same thing. We don't feel what you were feeling. However, I must say that one song that I really like from that record is Until It Sleeps.
That's a great record. Song.
Yeah, I think that is if I got to curate their live set, that would definitely be in there.
Really?
Yeah, just to be like, just to sort of scope up like from their whole different ear, like all their different records. That would be definitely that's an important song. I think that song, also being the first single off that record, was a smart move. Had I been the manager at the time, I would also say like that's the song that you do.
Really?
Because that's the good one.
Yeah, I mean it is a good song, but it's certainly again, if we're thinking about Metallica, or at a point where they would have wanted to capitalise on the amazing progress they've made so far. Maybe a lot of people would be interested to know how they would respond to the accusations of selling out and, leaving the metal scene behind. I mean, it's got riffs on it. That song, it's a heavy song in a very different way, but it's not an immediate kind of heavy metal banger.
No,
it's a kind of gloomy, like pondering, like piece of work instead. So it's quite a bold choice in many senses as well.
But it has a lot of the qualities that I think that James especially is known for, or at least in my universe. Like, it's a very, also very honest lyric. It feels like something that 5 years later, when they were doing some kind of monster, 5 years, 6, something like that, a lot of the things that they were sort of aggressively squeezing out of them on Saint Anger, a lot of those things are said already until it sleeps, it feels. Like he's talking about the inner beast and the inner monster that you can evoke and that might appear, and that you might not be so keen on meeting up with.
There's almost a level of kind of self-psychoanalysis going on with over some of the stuff he's talking about on those albums. Like he's kind of digging deep in this weird metaphorical self-discovery almost. Himself.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that on Load, if I'm just gonna think about it from a lyrical point of view, there was a lot of that was mature. The reason I think that myself and a lot of people who are clinging on to the 5 first records don't like Load and Reload is basically because they don't have any neoclassical stuff on it.
Yeah.
All that sort of neoclassical harmony stuff, it's gone. And they sort of traded that for some sort of bluesy stuff that it's just not like, even though there are riffs on the previous record, that was more like a, oh, here's a bluesy thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It was sort of lit up in a different way, whereas then all of a sudden you had like 70. I remember also there was like a selling point of Load being so long, because it was like 70 plus minutes long or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was just filled with these like blues rock that wasn't really at all like it was the Cajun pepper was missing. And I'm here in Louisiana, god damn it, and that was hard. And I still have a hard time. Like I've gone back to Load a couple times and just like still don't get it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, what about what they kind of eventually went after that? Because they did Garage Inc., which is kind of the fun jam, like just get out and do some fun covers album, and then after that was a really difficult period for them as a band. Jason left. They had real inner turbulence between Lars and James going on, as was very well documented on the Some Kind of Monster film. And eventually they came out with an album that just seemed like, I'm talking about Saint Anger, of course, it kind of seemed like this raw, like primal, just like spit. Do you know what I mean? That again, it felt like they almost kind of wanted to go, you want to see heavy, we can do heavy, here's Metallica doing heavy again, but a lot of people didn't quite like what they actually came out with at that point. What did you think of it as a fan when you heard Saint Anger for the first time?
I was a little bit older at the time than I was in 1996, so I try to see it from a more mature, and I also seen the film. That film is very interesting, and as much as a lot of bands can relate to all the different absurdities of Spinal Tap, I think that there's an element in Some Kind of Monster where you could relate, but they were like one of the definitely the first that showed it. And also they're further, they've gone further than anyone else before, so it was like a painful insight into not only the bedroom of a couple, it was the bathroom of a couple. Like, yikes.
Again, another bold move.
Oh, extremely.
Completely dismantling any mysticism they had left at that point,
Leaving the cinema, that was definitely something that I applauded. Like, wow. One, like giving that, as a fan, even though I was not a very big fan of Saint Anger at all. And at that point, I was sort of, Metallica was for me like a band that I liked those 5 records, and then I wasn't really following everything that they were doing throughout those years, because it just wasn't for me. It's like I didn't like a lot of their records like coming out. I didn't feel like them. However, I liked the Garage Inc. record. That had a lot, because
that's such a great album.
It's fantastic. That was fantastic. But I was just doing a lot of different things. But walking out of that cinema after seeing Some Kind of Monster, I was definitely also once again struck by how brave they are. Like, wow. Like, very, yeah, they had bigger balls than
absolutely
than most. And I would love to grow big balls like that.
We'll see, man.
No, so it's like, it was inspirational that way. It was like, for me, especially now looking back on it, like now when I have my own little career to sort of foster. It's them setting examples like that. I don't want to make that exact film, but it definitely, like, it's an inspiration. It's like a threshold of, like, this is how brave you have to be in order to become one of the big boys.
Yeah, and ultimately it didn't stop them still being the biggest metal band of all time.
No, it did no harm.
What do you think of,
and that's, I think that's very important to look at their accumulated, like, the sum of their career is the reason why they're here now.
What do you think of where they've come in the 21st century? The general consensus from fans of their 90s stuff, of the early stuff, people who didn't like Saint Anger or did like Saint Anger, the general opinion seems to be the 21st century has been pretty decent to Metallica on record. Death Magnetic, generally seen as a decent album.
Yeah.
Hardwired got really good reviews.
Yes.
Lots of very positive things towards some of the songs on there. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on where they've come since? Are there any songs or moments across those last couple of albums that really stick out to you?
I definitely like them better than the ones that they did 15 years ago. I sort of reacquainted myself with a lot of their material as we started playing together, or we played the same places as they. And the one thing that really, really blew me 7-8 years ago when we did the first show, that was like the first time I'd seen them in quite a while, was that it's still the same Metallica. It's like whenever they start playing, and this is what I tell a lot of my friends who sometimes are also a little bit like, I don't want to go see them. Like, go see them. It's really cool. It's Metallica. And they will play like a lot of our favorite songs, and as soon as they start playing it, it's them, and the magic is there. And that hits me every time. I try to see them as often as I can, and I definitely think that a lot of the new material from the newest record fits in very well with the old material. Yeah, definitely. One song that I forgot about, which they're playing on this tour, that I actually will also like. It's a very good song. Memories Remain.
The memory remains.
The memory remains.
Yeah.
I liked that actually when it came, because I really like Marianne Faithfull's vocals in it.
It's great.
It's
become a really good live thing as well, because the crowd will sing that bit. And
it definitely has. That is definitely also like up there on the classic. Like, this is a big classic track. Keep playing that. That's good. They played "I Disappear" for some time, which is also a cool song that actually sort of sticks up a little.
Very rarely played as well. But
Yeah.
I don't know if they've ever even played it in England. If they haven't, not very often.
I don't remember when I heard them play it. I actually don't. It's sort of I confuse things, especially the shows that wasn't on this tour, the tours that were back 5-6 years. But
yeah, that was a funny song, "I Disappear," because it was done for the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack, and it kind of pointed towards maybe they were gonna carry on that kind of more hard rock edged sound that they'd been building. but then they just scrapped it and St Anger happened. So who knows what could have happened if Jason might have stayed in the band or might not have, I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of what ifs with Metallica, but I think most people would agree they've come out of it all pretty okay.
I think they're doing quite okay.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, no, and again, I cannot underline how every night when I have the opportunity, when I go out and see them, they're very close to the band that I went to see when I was 11. It's still there. It's there. It's still fantastic when they rip into like Ride the Lightning or they played like they played the thing that should not be on this tour. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, they still understand that those songs still mean something to people.
Oh
as well.
yeah, I mean, also to their credit, that I really think that people should not forget, especially the people who fucking don't go to a show because they think that I don't know what they're thinking about what they're gonna do. It's like they are really, really treasuring their past and their catalog, and they do it really well. So, yeah, I'm as big of a fan as I've ever been, but from now in a completely different position, of course, which is strange if I'd met my 11, 12-year-old self, because back then, I mean, especially during the Black Album era, when I saw them play and for Christmas 1992, I got the a year and a half in the life of Metallica, the 2 videos. So the first part was about them making the Black Album, and the second part was about them touring the Black Album. And for me, that set the standard. Like, okay, so that's how you make a record? This was before I even recorded a demo. And I'd definitely not been on tour. And that was like, okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. Like, that's what I'm aiming at. I'm not there yet, but I'm at least like very close to the source, which is kind of phenomenal. I mean, I usually credit Metallica for sort of implementing the work ethic, and Iron Maiden, like plowing through Live After Death and looking at all those tour dates and trying to get a grasp of how you tour America. Same thing with the Black Album. I used to sit, I had the box with all the dates in it from just the Black Album, or the Wherever We May Roam tour. It's just like, that's how you do it. Like 300 shows. Let's go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Epic.
You have to do it. Yeah, and then I guess like a few lineups later, it definitely takes a toll on people. But I still think that that's how you do it, and that's how you break a rock and roll band. Touring. And that's what I've always wanted to do, and that's what I love to do, and I learned it from them.
Awesome. Tobias, thank you very much. That was wicked.
Thank you.
And good luck for the rest of the shows.
Thank you very much.